Okay, welcome back. So we're going to finish section 3, but we're going to do the two sections which cover the South and the West. If you look on here, there are 91 slides, but let me just forewarn you, most of them are pictures. It should go pretty fast. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're looking at the South, and as you know where the South is, right? It's located right down here. Really, the South starts at this line right here. It's what they call the Mason-Dixon line. It's the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland. This is where there was slavery. Any area north of that in the United States that had slavery, the only other place was Missouri, where it was legal. There were some places like in Kansas where people practiced it for a while, and even here in Illinois, but it was never legalized. So if you look at the South, it's 1/4 of the nation's land area, and you could kind of see that just by looking at it. And it has 1/3 of the population. There are 16 states, and of those 16 states, 11 of them were part of the Confederacy. There were a few up here in the northern part, Maryland, Delaware, West Virginia, and Kentucky, that never joined the Union. And then also, let's see, that's 4. And also Missouri did not. Okay. So anyway, the region historically it developed very rapidly because it had warm weather. So the climate was very good for agricultural purposes. At first, they grew tobacco down there and then cotton. Both of those are still grown there, different variety of them. They also grow corn. We wouldn't think that they had fertile soil because when you go down there, the soil looks red, so it doesn't look like the black dirt that we have there. But the soil is pretty fertile. Let me just forewarn you, for the test, you're going to have to know things like what portion of the land area and what portion of the population. So in each of these sections, we go over that. So don't worry, though, you're going to get a study guide. You can jot all this down. Okay, so let's go through some of the major areas. Just going to go through quickly. I am going to be assigning a map that has the major cities on it, and so this might help you to identify some of them. But anyway, let's go ahead and do it. There's Oklahoma. We're going to do the states first. Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, going from east to west. Mississippi, Kentucky, or west to east, sorry. Tennessee, Alabama, Florida. Most of you know that one. West Virginia up there. West Virginia seceded from Virginia during the Civil War. Maryland, Delaware, right? It's part of the Delmarva Peninsula. This is Washington, D.C. It's located right there between Maryland and Virginia. It's on the banks of the Potomac River. We'll be looking at that in a little bit more detail. There's Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Okay, let's see, something just came in, not sure what that was. Oh, there's the Appalachian Mountains, right? There's Oklahoma City, the capital of Oklahoma, Fort Worth, and then Dallas. So that's the Dallas-Fort Worth area. These two cities kind of run together. Fort Worth is first, right? And then there's Dallas. So Dallas is in the north, and then Houston is in the south. There's also San Antonio and Austin, right? So Houston's right there, and it's down there. You've got Galveston Bay that's located right there, and then the town of Galveston, which is on the coast. Okay, there's Austin, which is the capital, and then San Antonio. Those are the major cities there, and all of those cities are growing rapidly. And as I told you before, Houston might be overtaking Chicago as the third largest city in the United States. Okay, and then that's the Rio Grande River. We talked about that, or you had that assignment last week. The Gulf of Mexico. That's Mississippi River. Little Rock is the capital of Arkansas and also the largest city in that town or in that state. Baton Rouge is the capital of Louisiana, which means red stick. Baton is French for stick and rouge is red. But the largest city in Louisiana is New Orleans. That's the Mississippi Delta. So this area right here has continued to build up as different sediment comes down the Mississippi River. Right, and then there's New Orleans right there. It's famous for Mardi Gras that they have every February. Okay, moving up to Kentucky, Frankfort is the capital, right? And then down to Tennessee, Nashville is the capital. Also home to like country music. They've got some famous sites there. A lot of people go there to listen to country music. And then there's Memphis over there, right there on the Mississippi River, which was home to Elvis Presley. Moving up, there's the Ohio River, very important thoroughfare. I'm not sure what just came in. Mississippi River, I think we already did. Memphis, Frankfort, I don't know. Okay, up there, Delaware, we've got the Delmarva Peninsula, right? That one came in. Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. Jackson is the capital of Mississippi. That one just came in. Tallahassee is the capital of Florida. I see what I missed. We're going to talk about this. This is the Okefenokee Swamp. It's located right here. It borders between Florida, Georgia, right there on the Florida-Georgia line. Okay, something else came in. Don't know what. We've got Jackson, Mississippi Delta. Don't know. Okay, Tampa. Oh, I see what came in. Orlando came in right there. It's pretty close to the coast, but it's not on it. So that's where Disney World is. And then Tampa right here. And then St. Pete is there too. And that is Tampa Bay, which is located right here. Okay, and then this is Lake Okeechobee, right? It kind of drains down here from the water drains through the Florida Everglades. And then Miami is located down here at the southern part of Florida. This is home to a lot of Cuban immigrants. Sorry. And then down here, these are the Florida Keys. This is a group of islands off the coast of Florida. It's an archipelago that just kind of goes down. And then Montgomery is the capital of Alabama. Atlanta, the largest city and capital of Georgia. Columbia, South Carolina. And then Raleigh, North Carolina. I think I also have the Outer Banks. Yeah, the Outer Banks are also identified. Maybe some of you have been there, but these are like barrier islands out here. They kind of halt storm surges and that sort of thing. So there's islands out there in the Atlantic. And then Richmond is the capital of Virginia. We also have Charleston, the capital of West Virginia. Annapolis is the capital of Maryland, also home to the Naval Academy, and Dover is the capital of Delaware. That should be it. Oh, maybe the Chesapeake Bay. Yeah, the Chesapeake Bay is located right here, right? So that goes all the way up to Washington, D.C., pretty much. Oh, and then there's the Gulf Coastal Plain. This area right along the Gulf here that's very low-lying flat territory. And that's it. Okay, so these are the states right here that joined in as part of the Confederacy in the Bloody Civil War that lasted basically from 1860 when Abraham Lincoln was elected president until 1865. Robert E. Lee surrendered his troops to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. As I said before, though, this map is incorrect because West Virginia separated from Virginia. Probably Virginia didn't recognize that that occurred. But over 600,000 Americans lost their lives, the bloodiest war in our nation's history, which makes sense since both sides were the combatants. All right, so there are a lot of different, well, there are a few climate zones in the South. You have humid subtropical, and then you've got some really dry areas. Here in Texas, it's very dry, but down here you've got some tropical climates, right? Warm tropical and warm humid is what they call it here. Here's another way of looking at it. So this area right here, they define this as subtropical evergreen. And then this area right in through here, they call that kind of a temperate climate. Over here, it's very dry, right? And here, temperate grasslands, because there's an extension for the Central Plains that come and move down there. So a few different climate types. All right, and then this is a topographical map. It shows you how flat it is here. There are some parts of the Appalachian Mountains that are there. So you're going to see that in the western part of the Carolinas, northern part of Georgia, and then western part of Virginia as well. All right, again, here's the climate. So it's humid subtropical, low latitudes, right? So this is near the Gulf of Mexico, down towards the Caribbean Sea. Get lots of rainfall down there, about 60 inches or more per year. But over in El Paso, right, it is very, and that's in Texas, like West Texas, down in this region, it's very, very dry, right? They only get like 8 inches of rain a year. We get about 40. Okay, this is another way of showing the climate zones, right? Hot and humid, hot and arid, and then temperate. So those are the three main ones in the South. Okay, so we've talked about climate. This map right here shows vegetation. So you've got mixed forests, and in those you're going to have pine trees, mangroves. So you go down to Florida, and it's interesting. You see fruit trees, you see mangroves, you see pine trees. If you go down into Florida and mostly Louisiana, you're going to see bayous. In Florida, there are a lot of different swampy areas. There are throughout the South, but Florida specifically, there's the Okefenokee Swamp and the Everglades. There's a real vast variety of different wildlife, lots of fertile soil. Because it's so hot, things grow very, very rapidly. Sometimes things are introduced accidentally and then they kind of take over. One thing is this weed that just grows so rapidly. It's called kudzu. It came in from Japan, and it just kind of, in some areas, it just covers everything. Okay, here's what a bayou looks like in Louisiana. There's always stories, people missing in the bayou. If you want to get rid of somebody, you just bury them in the bayou. They're never to be found again. Right, and then here's some areas down in Louisiana. This is, you can see where the capital Baton Rouge is located. So here you got these swampy areas, right? Real wide rivers that are bayous in there. Right? That's a scenic byway, I guess. Alligators in there as well. Okay, and this is the Okefenokee Swamp. As I told you, it's located right there on the Florida-Georgia line. It's very interesting to go there, and hopefully I hope to show you this video. Okay, and then these are the Everglades. This is just a whole big area that drains southern Florida right here. It's just a very wide, shallow river, right, that drains that part of Florida. Here's some images of it. This one's really creepy. Some people, they like to get different snakes. Here we have a snake that ate a crocodile, and then they both ended up dying, I guess, because the snake just busted. I guess, what kind of snake is that? That really is like a python that does it. And then, so it'd be common to see those. Some people use these airboats, right, that kind of float on the water like that. And then here's what they look like. Just that the Everglades, just that slow moving river with a lot of grass along it as well. Okay, so here's different sections to just different ecology in these different regions of the South. Very diverse in the vegetation and wildlife in those areas. Right, and this is a mangrove tree. So they just kind of grow up and then root out. Their roots just go wherever, seeking the water. Okay, but lots of different vegetation. So in West Texas, it's going to be really dry like this. This one right here, this is a crepe myrtle tree. They're beautiful, and you see them throughout the South, but they won't grow here. It's too cold. And then, of course, you got the beaches of Florida, and then the swamp areas like at the Okefenokee Swamp. So lots of different vegetation. And this doesn't even count the evergreens or deciduous forests. I mean, just a variety of different vegetation types in the South. Okay, so agriculture, because the soil is pretty fertile and it's rich along the Atlantic coast and the Gulf Coast plains, they've been known for growing different crops in through there. Indians grew a variety of different crops, including maize and lemon squash beans. You'll see a picture of it in a minute. This right here, this image is of St. Augustine. This was a fort established by the Spanish back in 1565. This is the first permanent European settlement in North America, right there, or in what is now the United States. I shouldn't say North America because there were other places. After that, the English went to Virginia and they established themselves at Jamestown in 1607. And what they did, both the Spanish and the British, is establish like plantation system of agriculture. The Spanish tried to get the Native Americans to work for them. They were not very successful here in the United States, but they did that throughout New Spain. The British, they brought in slaves in 1619 to work in the plantation system there in a plantation economy. Okay, so the Old South, it started at Jamestown, right, in Virginia, and kind of spread out from there. And there was a mix of cultures, very diverse. First the British, and then Africans were brought in. Of course, you had the Native Americans, and then there were migrants coming up from Mexico, and then people who left, they left Canada and then came down to Louisiana, right? They were called Cajuns, right? Because they were Arcadians. They were from Arcadia, and then it kind of shortened it to Cajuns, right? Originally, it was just the production of tobacco and cotton, but then it evolved from there. And then today, it's got some high tech medical and other things that they've developed there as well. Okay, so the native population was all throughout the South, right? In the Deep South, what you have is what they called the five civilized tribes. So those would be the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Cherokee, or I'm sorry, the Creek and the Seminole, right, down and through here. Those are the five main ones. We call them the civilized tribes because even the Cherokee, they had written their own constitution, developed their own alphabet. They had plantations of their own, large ones. They had slaves. They were sedentary farmers. But what's going to happen is that they were going to be pushed west with the Indian Removal Act under Johnson's administration to Oklahoma. Just about all of them. Many of them died in the process. This map on the left, this is kind of sad, funny. But when the English came in, they went up the James River. They were looking for a strategic location to settle themselves. So they settled themselves right here at Jamestown. They were trying to hide so that they could go out and attack Spanish ships. But little did they know they were right smack dab in the middle of an Indian confederation. These were the Powhatan Indians. They went through probably about 40 years of warfare until the Powhatan eventually abandoned the area and moved westward. But then as the British continued to move westward, so did the Native Americans. Okay, so here's some of their food stuff, which was grown here in the Americas. And this was taken back to Europe, and this enabled the European population to just explode in size. And then more of them wanted to come over here. And of course, the native population was dying from European diseases. So it was a catastrophic mix of cultures for the Native Americans with the Columbian Exchange. All right, here are some of the crops that were grown up there in the southern colonies. You can see it there. They would have corn, indigo, naval stores. That's right here. They create things that are used for ships, right? Also raising pigs, but a lot of it was tobacco, right? So this was the area that was settled very early on, all along the Chesapeake Bay there. And up here too, this is the Delaware River. Okay, and then this is where Africans were brought, slave catchers, many of whom were Africans, would catch other Africans, sell them to Europeans for weapons or other things. Most of the slaves who came over, went to South America or they came to the Caribbean right here. Only about 4% came directly to the United States. many of those areas in Central America, or I'm sorry, the Caribbean and South America were known as slave societies because majority of the population were slaves, whereas in what became the United States, they were societies with slaves because slaves did not make up the bulk of the population. Okay, so then we're going to get this triangular trade. Different things, specifically like rum, furs, naval stores were being sent here. And then weapons, some other items would come down here. Or they would go to the Caribbean. But anyway, they'd get slaves from here. Slaves would be traded in the Caribbean for sugar. Sugar and other things would be taken up here. They would make rum. And so you get this whole trade throughout the Atlantic, and that coincided with the trade winds. So it worked perfectly for those ships at that time to move that direction. Okay, so slavery, as I said, came to the America in the United States in 1619. Right. One thing though, the South never really developed industry and it didn't develop as quickly as the North did. And so there's some real problems with poverty. This was going to change a little bit with the New Deal when they got electricity in there from the Tennessee Valley Authority, but then also through the Great Society. This is President Lyndon Johnson. Down there, and he is visiting the home of a man who's impoverished, and so he did that to try to draw attention to the plight of many people in the South. Some people in the South were so poor that they called them clay eaters because they were forced to eat clay. All right, so here's some old Southern industries. You've got textiles, making clothes along the Piedmont region. There was agriculture with tobacco and cotton and other things that were grown down there. But oil was discovered in eastern Texas in 1901, and so that kind of changed things. The drop in oil prices kind of marked the end of that business down there at that time, and so they've expanded to some new industries since then. Okay, so the New South, they continue with their agriculture and with livestock. They've got this humid subtropical climate. Originally that hindered industry, but now with air conditioning and modernization, it's not an issue, right? Also, they've got the coal industry down there. They've got natural gas and they've got oil, right? So there's a lot of people from the Rust Belt where we are, who are attracted to it down there. So are businesses because land is cheaper and wages are lower. The unions aren't as entrenched in the South as they are in the Midwest, where you have these formerly very highly industrialized states. Tourism is the major industry down there because of the beaches and the amusement parks and the nice climate. So they go down there. So people want to go down there for that reason. All right, they've also developed some high tech. So in Houston and in Cape Canaveral in Florida, the space industry is very important, right? Also in Alabama, Huntsville, and places there. Other new businesses have moved down, as I said, because the labor is cheaper, so is the land. You got fisheries down there, some of the largest in the nation, tourism, as I talked about. And also in Atlanta, you've got, this is a center for communications because you got CNN. Okay, so this is what they call the Sun Belt, basically everything in the South where it's nice and warm, right? Mild climate, good beaches. A lot of people choose to go there to retire or to look for jobs. People would much rather live there than they would up north. All right, if you look at the population, it's very diverse. As I said, there's Europeans, but then Africans were originally came to the United States as slaves, so there's a large African population there. Well, people with African origins. Hispanics, especially in Texas and in Florida, right? Cubans are in Miami. People were escaping from Cuba when that nation went communist. And then in Louisiana, you've got people who are of French origins because they came from Acadia that was up here to the north. This was after the French and Indian War, and then they came down here. They were Acadians, and then their name became Cajuns, right? So they speak kind of a different they have a different accent. All right, so here's what you can see where you have a large Hispanic population in the South, and this is known as the Black Belt. where in this area right here, there's a large population of Black people in each of these counties, and they make up the majority group. It's not necessarily that all Black people, there's a majority of Black people. You've got people who are of English origin, people who are of Irish and that sort of thing, and then you've got people with African origin. So that's why they might have the higher percentage of the population in there. You also have in here, this is a large Cuban population. Okay, if you look, the cities in the South are growing very rapidly, especially in Texas. Texas because of the climate, but they're also very business friendly. So Houston's number 4, and as I told you, it may be moving up very quickly to be number 3. San Antonio's number 7, Dallas number 9. So they're growing pretty rapidly. And you can still see on here, though, on this map, and I'm not sure what the date is, New York beats them all by quite a bit, and then you've got Los Angeles. Okay, so here's New Orleans, right? This is was established by the French, major trading center at the mouth of the Mississippi, known for Mardi Gras and its music. It suffered a horrible hurricane called Katrina in 2005. You can see this, a good chunk of New Orleans is actually below sea level. And so what they built along here are seawalls. Well, the storm surge came and flooded New Orleans in 2005. If you look at this right here, you can see all the areas that were well below sea level, right? These areas were all flooded horribly, right? So the cool shades are below the normal level of Lake Pontchartrain, so below the level of the lake. Right, there's Atlanta, right, capital of Georgia, financial center too. It's a business hub. It competes with Chicago as having one of the busiest airports in the country. Sometimes Chicago is, sometimes they are. Right, here's Houston. I lived there for a little while. Space Center there, also an important medical center. It's a big industry for trade, right? 4th largest city, oil and banking there as well. Miami, as I told you, this is big Cuban area. And then they've got this architecture that was built in the 1920s, a historic area. It's Art Deco. It's very beautiful, and they're known too for their beaches, of course. And then this Washington, D.C., people debate, is this the northernmost southern city or southernmost northern city? So it's right there on the banks of the Potomac River, right over here, on this side, you've got Virginia, right? And on the other side, you've got Maryland, and it's kind of carved out of Maryland. So in Arlington, too, there's a lot of federal government agencies. The Pentagon is here, and Arlington National Cemetery is here, right? So there's some of it that's located on this side as well. It was chosen as the capital in 1790 and is the first planned city in the United States. Okay, so here's kind of a image of the mall, the National Mall. You're going to see lots of pictures of it. Okay, here's a lot of pictures. You get the National Archives, the Air and Space Museum, Smithsonian Castle. Here's a map of the mall right here, but you're going to see a better one in a minute. Okay, and then this is the White House, 2 different views. This side right here is located, if you were standing right there. Oops, nope, sorry. This one is this side, right? This side right here is if you were standing here, and it looks out onto, if you look directly this way, you would see the Washington Monument. Okay, here's some other monuments. This one right here, this is at Arlington National Cemetery. This is the Washington Monument, of course, the Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial, whoops, and then this one is the Supreme Court. And then there you can kind of see a different view of where it's located. This is the first plan of the city, right? And this is what it looks like from the air. No building can be, well, all buildings have to be a certain height so that you can always see our nation's capital. But this is the area right here that is known as the mall, the Washington Mall. And on either side, you got a whole bunch of museums, and these are known as the Smithsonian collectively. Not all of them are parts of it. And then down here, You've got the Lincoln Memorial, and then over in this area, that's where the White House is. And then over here, this is the Jefferson Memorial. This right here is the tidal basin, and that's where you get the cherry blossoms every year that bloom. Back over here across the river, this is Arlington, and that's Arlington National Cemetery. The Pentagon is located over here. Okay. Hopefully you all get to go there one day. You'll get other buildings along here, like the National Archives and other things. This road right here, this is Pennsylvania Avenue, and it goes by the White House. And there's another view. You can see Pennsylvania Avenue that goes here, and it curves, and it goes right by the White House. And there's the Jefferson Memorial. If you were up here and you looked out the window, you'd see the White House, you'd see the Lincoln Memorial, you'd see the Jefferson Memorial, and you would see the Capitol. There's another image of it. When you go to a major city, you'll see maps like this. Some of you maybe have done that. So this tells you how to get around on their subway system. So if you wanted to go from like the Pentagon right here to, let's say, you wanted to get to, where are we going? We get right here, Mount Vernon Circle. So what you'd have to do is possibly take the yellow line, and you could go straight there. Sometimes if you want to go other places, you have to take the blue line and then transfer onto the orange line and then get there like that. So these kind of help you. The metro system is beautiful there. This is what it looks like inside. It's just really nice. And I haven't been there for a few years, but when I have, it's always been very well maintained. Okay, let's look at the West. Lots of pictures here. So the West, 13 different states, right? It goes from the Great Plains all the way to the Pacific. It also includes Alaska and Hawaii. Half of the land in the United States, but only 1/5 of the population. California is the most populous. Some people are leaving, other people are going there, so I don't know if their population is growing or shrinking. Very varied landscape, right? Lots of different climate regions there. It's the most rapidly growing region of the country. Right. If you look at it, the development of the West was dependent upon water because there's so many places in the West where you couldn't live because there just wasn't. So what they've done is they've taken the Colorado River right here and dammed it up at the Hoover Dam, right? And it created Lake Mead. From there, water is then diverted to other locations in Southern California, to Phoenix, through these huge aquifers, right, that diverts the water. All right, so water is a very important major factor developing the vegetation and also the settlement of the West. If you get up to the Pacific Northwest, there's ample rainfall up along the coastal areas, but on the other sides of the mountains, there's not much rain, right? So when you get into like Seattle, they get 39 inches of rain a year, and it's just very lush. It's almost like rainforest sort of things there. But on the eastern side, like in Reno, Nevada, very little rain at all. That Reno only gets like 7 inches a year. There's a big difference. Okay, so here is very mountainous. This is the topography. You've got, of course, the Rocky Mountains right here, and then the Great Basin is in the middle. In this area right here, you've got the Mojave Desert, right? It's very, very dry. All along here, these are the Cascade Mountains, right? When you move down this way, these are the Sierra Nevadas. Along the coast, you get the coastal ranges in California and up through Oregon and Washington as well. And the Rocky Mountains extend all the way up into Canada and down into Mexico. Right, here's another image of the topography. And then this looks like the climate of the West. So a lot of different climate types, and that has to do with the vegetation. And there's also, you know, of course, Alaska and Hawaii too, different climate types there as well. Okay, so if you look at the climate of the West, in some regions it's very arid and dry, and other places like Oregon and Washington, they get a whole lot of precipitation along the coast. Hawaii is tropical, and then of course in Alaska, very little vegetation because it's tundra. All right, here's another thing. This shows the rainfall, and if you look along the coastal areas here, just north of San Francisco, and you go all the way up, here they get a lot of rainfall, like 40 to 50 inches or more annually. But down in through here, we look where the Mojave Desert is, it's extremely dry. In the Central Valley of California even, it's pretty dry there as well. Out along the Rocky Mountains, not much rain there either. Right? So not much rainfall out west. That's why water is so important to the settlement. Okay, here's another image of it, a little bit closer up. You can tell where some areas just get a lot of rain. All right, they also have a lot of minerals out there because that's indicative of mountains, right? So there's been gold, silver, uranium, and some fossil fuels. Up in Alaska, they have oil, and the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline was built there, right, to get the oil from the locations where they are to the coast so it can be shipped out. Okay, so also this shows economic activity. So you can see in many different areas here in California, oh, they're flush with all sorts of benefits there. They have a great climate, great soil, so they can grow all sorts of crops. They've got a long growing season, right? So different things occur there. They've got chemicals, high-tech industry, Silicon Valley. They've got dairy, livestock, all sorts of things. In the Pacific Northwest up here too, also high tech, right? But they've got commercial grain. I know where I grew up in Oregon, there were grains and cattle grazing and that sort of thing. Down here, not agricultural because it's just so dry. So food processing, logging, fishing, mostly the logging and fishing is going to happen here in Alaska. Right, filmmaking, of course, too, in LA and other parts in California. Okay, this is the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline. This is where they take things from the northern part of Alaska up here, and then they have this pipeline that's built, and it takes it down to the coastal areas down here where it's sent out on these big oil tankers that take the oil to places where they need it. Right, and then here, this is forestry and fishing. 40% of the lumber in the U.S. comes out of the Pacific Northwest. So fishing is very important in Oregon, Alaska, and Washington. They've got salmon fishing, and you know, the biggest catch, you can see that in Alaska as well. All right, cities out there, many cities have grown very rapidly, especially here in California. So I want to draw your attention to some of them. San Diego is located right at the southern tip of California. If you go up to right here where there's a bay, that's where you have San Francisco, which is not far from the capital of Sacramento. Now, if you go between San Francisco and San Diego here, it's about a quarter of the way up there. That's where you're going to get Los Angeles. Phoenix is the largest city in the capital of Arizona. Las Vegas is located down here, not far from Hoover Dam at the southern tip of Nevada, right? Denver, almost smack dab in the middle of Colorado. Salt Lake is located right here. There's a lake there. This is Salt Lake, and then that Salt Lake City is the capital there. Portland is the largest city in Oregon, and then Seattle is located on what's known as Puget Sound. So there's a waterway that comes in here, and that is known as Puget Sound right there. And Seattle is located right on the coast of that. So a lot of these were built along the railroad or at the end, the terminus of the railroads. Okay, this is the aqueduct that takes water to Los Angeles. It was completed in 1973 and it's 685 miles long, right? So Los Angeles, second largest city in the country, sprawling. We know it's got urban sprawl. It started as a cattle town with the gold rush, but then it really boomed with the film industry in the 1930s, and then it grew since then. Okay, so here is the aqueduct system in California, bringing the water to various locations. Here they take it from the Central Valley and it goes down to other locations in Southern California. Here at Los Angeles, right? San Diego would be located right there. A lot of that water is brought in, of course, from the Colorado River and then sent to other places where it's very dry, like Phoenix, Tucson, and San Diego, Los Angeles, places like that. Okay, here's Los Angeles, city out there. San Diego, beautiful. Been there quite a few times. They've got a really neat old gaslight district, which is really fun. Lots of restaurants and fun things to do. Here's San Francisco. Of course, it's right there on the bay. You can go the San Francisco Bay Bridge. We rented bikes, rode across the Bay Bridge, and then went to a town on the other side of the bay, and then ferried back across. Had a blast. And then here's Phoenix, the skylines of the cities anyway. Las Vegas, the Strip. And then this is Space Needle, which makes, the skyline of Seattle very famous. People usually know that. And then here's Denver, Colorado. And here's another image of the diverse landscape and vegetation of that area. So you've got rainforests, you've got the Pacific coastal areas are very different, tundra, Rocky Mountains, deserts, and the Great Plains. We're going to look at those and then we'll be finished. Okay, so we got the Grand Canyon. Of course, this is in northern Arizona. The Colorado River flows through it. And here you can see the Colorado River comes down from Colorado. And this is the park right there. And then it just kind of meanders along. Then it goes into Nevada. This is Lake Mead that was created because the Hoover Dam dammed it all up. And from there, that's where the water is diverted. Right? One of my things I've hiked the Grand Canyon, but I want to do a rafting trip down it. I think that would be awesome. Okay, and then we've got just this diverse scenery. This is Arches National Park. Beaches. This is Huntington Beach in California, right? And then Hawaii. And we talked about Sequoia National Forest before, so this is it. And then, of course, Yellowstone, Old Faithful. Right? And then if you were going to go to the Pacific Northwest near Seattle, it rains so much there that you have just these very dense forests. The ferns grow on the ground. It's very lush and green. It's quite beautiful. Right? And then this would be the tundra up in Alaska. Not much grows there just because it's tundra. Right? You have a very short growing season, so you get these short stubby plants that grow there. Right? And then this is Denali. Back when I was your age, it was called Mount McKinley, but with a lot of things in the United States, they had names before Europeans came here. Europeans gave them a name, and then the indigenous population's like, well, it's actually called this. So this reverts back to its original name. It was called Mount McKinley after President McKinley. All right, and then this is the Mojave Desert. This is that very dry desert between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. And then Hawaii, of course, active volcanoes still take place there, or they're there still. Right? And then this is Alaska. One thing a lot of people don't know is that there's a part of Alaska, I'm trying to get my thing to work here, right down here. This is also Alaska, right? To get there from here, most people fly because there's no road, right? And our capital, Juneau, is located, or the capital of Alaska is right there. Anchorage is the largest city, but everything is pretty small there. They don't have a very large population, right? It's one of the largest states, but with the smallest population. There are only 2 roads that enter that major city, right? So it's just so undeveloped and kind of our last frontier. Look how close to Russia that we are. Just the Bering Strait right here separates it. This is the Bering Sea, right? And then this right here, these are the Aleutian Islands. They continue to go out in that direction. Right, and then there's the Hawaiian Islands. They are 2,000 miles from the United States. There are 8 different islands. They're almost smack dab in the middle of the Pacific. They've made a lot of technological improvements, so you can have instant contact there. The average temperature, I mean, it's almost like 80 degrees year round. I have only been to Oahu, right? And area the areas on Oahu, which is this island right here, right? Honolulu is there, Waikiki Beach, Pearl Harbor. So that's the only place I've ever been. I'd love to go visit some of the other islands.